So I know I'm good on TikTok. All right, here we go. All right. So now we are rolling. We are rolling. We are rolling. I still don't think there's a share screen on this thing. Yeah, there is. Ooh, there is. There's a share screen. This is going to be dope. Yeah. So there's a share screen feature here. All right, cool. Says I have too many teeth to be Reuben. That's true. What's up? What's up, Bend over? What's up, man? Too many teeth to be Reuben, huh? Yeah, that's me, man. Who's this? I know Facebook user. It can be anybody nowadays, man. And then just to test, make sure you guys can see my screen here. For anybody here that's tuning in, I don't know if you guys can see my screen or not, and I can't share a screen. So unfortunately, you guys won't be able to see the beautiful slide deck that I put together, but that's no issue. So who's the Facebook user talking shit about Reuben's teeth? Also, can y'all see my slides? Can y'all see my slide deck? Well, for those who don't know, I got Streamyard up and running, and Streamyard is this awesome platform where you can just live stream on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and everything. And then I got the TikTok up once again. Blake, what's going on, man? Yeah, I got way too many teeth to be Reuben. So Blake, man, can you see my screens, my slide deck here? I don't want to go full screen on these simply because, honestly, I don't know if I'll be able to read the comments and go from there. All right. All right, cool. So I'm gonna just leave it like that. All right, that's 9:30 on the dot. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So what we are talking about today is how to analyze apartment buildings. So guys, obviously, for those who don't know me, when I try to put on a presentation or an educational thing, I want to get some feedback. I want questions live and in the moment, because I think that's the best way to kind of communicate, especially when we're all virtual and I can't see your faces to see if you're confused, to see if it's actually coming across or not. Okay. So feel free to absolutely chime in with any questions, comments, whatever. And let's try to make this as interactive as possible. All right. So to introduce myself real quick, so everybody understands who I am and why I'm talking about apartment complexes. For those who don't know me, my name is Mike Glaspie. I spent a lot of time I'm still an active real estate investor. But when I first got started, yeah, I did some of the single family, but I quickly wanted to get into the commercial space, right? So from there, I went ahead and got licensed. We started the 5 Pillars team. And then I decided to focus specifically as a commercial broker. And as a commercial real estate broker or real estate agent, I helped a lot of clients purchase apartment complexes. And then I started purchasing my own multifamily portfolios, small apartment complexes, and so forth. And now I own a little over 134 doors. Again, a lot of them consisting of those apartment complexes and even a hotel, which if you guys really want to dive into that today, we can talk about how to analyze a hotel and how it differs from an apartment complex. All right. So that's just me in a nutshell, but we're going to get right to it. So today, when we're talking about when we're talking about apartment complexes, we're really going to cover the overview of what apartments mean. Everybody has an idea of what apartments mean, but I want to make sure that you guys understand it from a lending standpoint, from a real estate professional standpoint, what we dictate as apartments, and then the different valuation methods. All right. And we're really going to focus on those. And then we're going to get into the formula of the income approach where it really matters. And that's where we're going to really determine how to add value, how to increase value, how to kind of pick apart financial statements and all that good stuff. So this is going to be extremely important information for any of you guys who are interested in investing in apartments. And I honestly don't care if you guys want to buy them yourself and be like the main owner, the head honcho, right? The person who owns it. Or if you just want to invest passively, right? Which means you put your money into somebody else's deal, but technically own a little bit of that apartment complex, right? So that's kind of where we're at. And hopefully that's what you're going to walk away with, is understanding how to value it. All right. So what makes an apartment complex? Now you guys can already see here on the slide, but just let me know what you think of. What do you think of when you talk about apartment complexes, or when you think of apartment complexes? Is it high rises, right? Is it New York City apartment in the sky? Or is it more so like a whole bunch of units kind of stacked on top of each other, 2-story, 3-story, right? What's your idea? And you realize that a lot of times it'll change, right? It'll change depending on where you are, what you consider to be normal, right? Because I know here in North Carolina, when I personally think of apartments, man, I think of, stuff that I grew up in. It can even be single story community of like quads, right? 4-unit buildings all under one roof, and there's a whole complex of those. That could be apartments. Or we could be talking about the legitimate 500 units all stacked on top of each other that has an apartment gym, in-house laundry, and all that other stuff, right? But ultimately, what's important to understand is that apartments can change. Like the visual, physical thing of what an apartment is can change. It's subjective. I mean, yeah, a group of houses all together, you could be like, this is now an apartment complex. The important thing to understand is that when real estate professionals are saying multifamily apartments, they're thinking 5+ units. All right. 5+ units. That's the key. So 4 units and below, remember, that could be a quadruplex, right? That could be something like 4 units under one roof. You can live in 1 unit, rent out the other 3. The reason that's important is because 4 units and below, you can get 30-year financing VA loan or FHA loan or homeowner occupied loan. You could live in it. For the sake of the real estate world, that is considered residential, a place where you can lay your head and you can live in it. That means you get the best financing. You can even get 0% down. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, it's a whole different category. The way that it has to be sold, the way that it's valued, all that stuff is completely different than apartment complexes. Completely different. So when you think apartments, you got to think 5+ units. 5+ units. All right. Now we're thinking, all right. So here we go. In Florida, it's the same as North Carolina, unless you get to larger cities like Tampa and Miami, as far as what apartments look like, right? We were talking about apartments looking like everything else. What's going on, y'all? What's going on? We were talking about apartment buildings, right? And how they differ from residential to apartment. And it's important to understand that a residential property, right? A residential would be a 1 to 4 unit, duplex, triplex, quadruplex, or even a single family. And why that's so important is because the type of loans that you can get, right? We're talking about those type of loans you can get 0% down, 100% financing. But when we're talking about apartments, you can't get that. You have to put money down. So we're talking 5+ units. All right. Now, if you go to a commercial apartment real estate agent that's all they do, right? I'm talking Marcus and Millchap. I'm talking about big boys. And you go across and you show them a 5-unit property, they're going to look at you and be like, no, that's not an apartment. An apartment to them might be 75 units and more. And so it's important to kind of understand that. And that's fine. That's fine, right? Because what my point is apartments are subjective. Apartments just mean 5+ units, because now it's different financing, it's different ways to evaluate it. And so what I've done is I made a little slide deck here. You consider small apartments anywhere from 5 units to 20 units. All right. Medium from about 20 units to 75 units, and large about 75 units and above. But it doesn't matter. The valuation method doesn't change much. All right. We're going to cover that. I appreciate that. Sherry says, also that, we're just trying to educate people on, how to potentially invest in these opportunities, right? All right. So different valuation methods. The first one is called the comparable sales approach. Comparable sales. Now, what that means is this is very similar when we talk about just like in single family homes, right? We go out, we buy the property, and we're looking to see what other properties around it sold that are just like this one. Now we can say, hey, look, because all of these sold for $100 a square foot, this one will sell for $100 a square foot. Therefore, the right value is here. That's comparable sales approach. All right. This is used from the 1 to 4 units. Even quadruplexes, duplexes, and triplexes are all valued the same way. All right. The other way is called the income approach, and that's what we're going to focus on primarily today, is the income approach. The income approach is very common when we start to get to apartment complexes, because now we're worried about how much income does this actually produce. This is typically used for investment properties, all right, for investment properties, but we always have to think, if we're buying this property with a loan, then we need to evaluate this property just like the lender, the person giving us the loan, is going to evaluate it. Does that make sense? Because, yeah, you can get a 4 unit. Let's call it or a 2 unit. Let's just say it's a duplex and it's an investment property. And we say, all right, well, it's making income, so we're going to use the income approach to evaluate it. Well, that's fine. You can do that all you want. But when you go out and get that loan officer is simply going to use comparable sales. That's it. They're not going to use the income approach, right? So you have to consider that when you're evaluating what the hell type of review is the loan provider going to do. And so we're going to talk a lot about the income approach, but we got to understand, though, apartments, remember, 5 units and above, they can be evaluated both ways. So the question becomes, why? Why would they choose comparables versus income? So income approach shows that, hey, it's been stabilized for a few years. We got these financial records. We got all that good stuff. We can use the financial income to project future performance. When you don't have those finances, when you don't have anything to show how it's been performing, they're going to use comparable sales approach. All right. They will use the comparable sales approach. So now you have to be ready to structure your offer compared on those two. But we're going to talk about the income approach right now, because a lot of times when people buy apartment complexes, they buy it, they get it stabilized, and then they sell it for a profit using this method. So the formula is this. The formula for income approach is potential gross income minus your vacancy equals your effective gross income. From there, you're going to minus your expenses to come out with your net operating income. And don't worry, we're going to break each one of these down, so we don't leave you guys behind. We're going to break each one of these down. Now, once you come out with the NOI, or that net operating income, to determine the value, we're now going to divide that NOI by the cap rate, capitalization rate. And we're going to cover all of this here in a second, but I just want to make sure that we break it off there. So we're going to start off with potential gross income. So what is potential gross income? I want you to think of potential gross income as literally any potential income that the property can produce, period. So go ahead and put in the chat just different things that a property can do to produce income. And I'll start it off. First one we got is rent, right? Rent makes sense. What else? What else can produce income on a property besides just rent? I'm gonna want y'all to push. So for the guys that are on Facebook, you guys can see the slide. So go ahead and add some of the stuff that's on the slide there. All right. Boom. Perfect. Ben says you can have a washer and dryer that people pay for. That's exactly right. Right. And you could do it one of two ways there, Ben. You can do washer and dryer inside the unit, right? Inside the actual house that they rent every month. Or you can do something like a laundry facility where they have to go in and maybe they pay with quarters, or they pay with a card or a charge card or something like that. So that's a really good one. Absolutely. Vending machines. Boom. Perfect. Both of y'all hit it. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Vending machines. That's another good one. Right. And you don't even have to own the vending machine. You don't. You can have somebody come and service that bad boy, and you just collect rent for it being on your property. Parking. Yeah, maybe you got VIP parking somewhere, or not even VIP. Maybe it's, hey, you have to pay for a parking pass in the garage. Or with rent, you get one parking pass, and if you want any additional, you got to pay for that. Exactly right. ATM. A lot of people don't think about an ATM. That's another one, right? Same thing. You don't have to own the ATM. You can just have it on site with maybe a little snack section behind the front desk, right? You guys can do something called gym potentially, right? So say the gym membership isn't in there. Maybe you can do that, or you can have a gym that's on site, and then maybe you just charge for classes. Like you have somebody come in and host classes there, and you take a piece of profit from their classes, and you sign a contract with that person for 3 years, and now you have income for 3 years. You see what I'm saying? There's so many ways to add income. And this is the part that I love about apartments, is because honestly, it is only left to your imagination how much value you can add into an apartment. Seriously. And it's beautiful. Some people do rooftop gardens, and you have to pay to be a member of that rooftop garden. It's like, come on, right? There's so many things. Some people do solar panels, because that solar panel will provide a discount in discount in utilities. But then if you can collect enough, you can sell that solar energy back to the city, to the power grid, right? There's so many ways, guys. And so understanding that potential gross income is everything that you can do to bring in income to the property. That's potential gross income. Now, the next thing you have to understand is, remember, it's potential gross income minus vacancy, right? So what is vacancy? Everybody's pretty much aware vacancy is just all your unoccupied properties or unoccupied units. Now, typically this is expressed in some sort of percentage. All right. So let's just say on average, you have 3% vacant for the entire year. Then that's going to be your vacancy rate. So now you'll have your potential gross income. That's 100% minus your vacancy of, let's say, 3%. Boom, your effective gross income is now 97% of that effective gross income. But let's talk about this. I don't care if you're 100% occupied. Even if you're 100% occupied, a lender, remember, we always have to think in the mind of the lender when we're evaluating properties, because they're the ones giving us the money. A lender will always, at a minimum, put 5% vacancy there. That's how they hedge against their own risk. They're going to say, even if you're beautiful, beautiful records, man, I love it. I see it all. 2 years, 3 years, track history. We're still going to put 5% in case something happens. So even at 100%, even at your effective gross income comes in, even if you show 3%, always do a minimum of 5% for vacancy. And if it's more than 5%, then put the real number there. All right. But at absolute minimum, you always want to do 5% vacancy. And then boom, after that, you're sitting at your effective gross income. All right. And effective gross income is basically whatever's remaining. And that, the effective gross income, is our true starting point, right? Is our starting point when we're thinking about numbers, when we're thinking about evaluating this property. All right. So now we're about to get into expenses, but let me know if you guys have any questions so far. I don't want to move too fast. I will open it up for Q&A, for any Q&A at the end as well. But I want to make sure that you guys understand the general overview and where our income basically comes from before we get into expenses. All right, everybody good so far? All right, cool. And remember, if you guys got questions or comments, just throw it in there while we're going through it. I'm not going to be, the presentation's almost over, right? The little mini session's almost over here, so it'll be open from there. All right. Okay. On expenses. Now, same thing here. Expenses are anything that take money away except your mortgage. And I'm going to explain that here in a second. I know a lot of people always throw in mortgage thinking that that's part of the expense. And although it may be, it's not for the NOI calculation. All right. All right. So one of the questions here before we get into expenses is, what is the best way to borrow money? And the best way to borrow money is subjective. I say subjective because there's so many ways to borrow money, but specifically from a bank, you want to make sure that your profile is legit, and your profile includes everything from your credit score, your credit report in general. It doesn't have to be the highest score. It doesn't have to be the highest score, but it does have to be clean, meaning no collections or bankruptcies in the past 7 years and things of that nature. And then the property itself is going to be extremely important as to how much the bank will give you when we're doing commercial loans. The bank's not concerned about your income and things like that. So the best way to borrow money, first and foremost, I would say, is get pre-approved with a lender. Understand what your limitations are there, because you may not need anything. Now, if you need something in addition to that, then there are some other creative ways to borrow money, like private money or hard money. and stuff like that. We could talk about that towards the end for sure if you want to stick around for that. Absolutely. And then next question is cap rate. And we're going to get into cap rate here shortly. So just hold on, bear with me for like 5 minutes and we're going to get into cap rate. And that's another good point. He says, hey, hold your stocks and borrow against your stocks. And this, we're going to pause right here because I love the fact that you mentioned that. And for anybody who doesn't know, everybody says, take your money out of the stock market, take your money out of the stock market, invest it here. Well, people say that, right? Not everybody. But you can actually have your money into your stock portfolio, and you can get a line of credit against that portfolio and never have to cash out your stocks. Now, they're not going to give you 100%. Let's say you had $100,000 in stocks sitting somewhere, even in a 401k, right? Even in a 401k, a bank may say, I'll be willing to give you 70% worth of the value of this for you to go out and do investments with. So that's a really good point there. And I'm glad you brought that up. That is a great way. So there are several other creative ways to borrow money for sure. Another one would be a whole life insurance value policy, right? And things like that. Like I said, we can touch on that. And then again, one more follow-up is what is vacancy? And the vacancy rate is essentially your unoccupied units. All right. So if you got 100 properties, 100 doors in your apartment complex, all right, and I'm using 100 because it makes math easy for me, and you have 5 units unoccupied, well, then we do a ratio, and that's a 5% vacancy rate. That's what that means. Vacancy is basically what's not occupied. Okay. All right. And yeah, servant of the universe, be sure to bring up the question about financing here towards the end too, because that's I'd love to touch on that. There's a lot of different ways that you can borrow money. All right, so let's touch on these expenses real quick. All right, so with expenses, it's everything except mortgage. All right, so just go ahead and throw out different ideas of what you can consider for expenses, and I'll start to name a few, but there are several more. All right, so the first one can be utilities. Right? I want you to think about utilities. And yes, although each individual tenant may have to pay for utilities, there may be common area utilities like parking lighting, hallway lighting, all that stuff, alarm security system, so forth and so on. Property management. That's exactly right. Property management is another one. Maintenance. Absolutely. Because obviously there's going to be repairs that you're going to be responsible for. You're going to have lawn care. You're going to have lawn care potentially, or grounds maintenance, right? Cleaning. Potentially there's going to be trash services. All right. All of those things. Insurance. Now, I know I said we don't include the mortgage, but we still have to include the property taxes and the insurance. Those are expenses. All right. All of those things. When you look at, I'll put a highlight here because remember, we're always going to go in and evaluate this apartment complex, and we're going to ask for the financial statement, the profit and loss statement. It's called many things, trailing 12. We're going to look for these, and on there may be several different expenses that just don't make sense, and you're trying to figure out what the hell they are. They may say things like salary. They may say mileage expense, office supplies, so forth and so on. What you have to realize is every owner is always trying to look for a way to hedge against taxes and show a paper loss, right? We want to show a paper loss. So what you have to be able to do is look at these financial statements and say, all right, which ones are legitimate? Management is legitimate. I'm going to need a management company. Maintenance is legitimate. Utilities is legitimate. Trash, legitimate, right? Salary, I'm paying the management company, so maybe I don't have a salary. Or maybe I'm paying myself a salary, so maybe there. All right, so maybe it's legitimate. Mileage expense. Mileage expense for who? Is it for me? Well, then it's for me. How often do I plan on seeing the property? All right, seeing the property once. Okay, cool. Maybe I write that off as a mileage expense, right? And so you start to see how you have to identify which ones actually make sense to you, because a lot of that stuff is fluff. It's just for paper pushing so we can save some money on taxes. All right. Now, let's talk about why I didn't put in the mortgage. Does anybody know? Can anybody say why we don't include the mortgage when calculating net operating income, NOI? When we look at our effective gross income, minus our expenses, why isn't mortgage debt payment put into the expense column? Does anybody know? No right or wrong answers. Well, I guess there could technically be a wrong answer, but we won't, no judgment here. No judgment here. Anything. Bam. Got it on the first try. You're exactly right. It's for personal use. Do you invest in apartment buildings? You crushing it today. Killing it. You got some good stuff. All right. So that's exactly right. It's for personal use, guys. So think about this. Let's say you have one borrower, perfect credit score, all the, 850 credit score, super liquid, has $1 million in cash, experience out the wazoo. And then you have somebody over here with a 680 credit score, not that much money and very little experience. The interest rates and the terms on those loans are going to be completely different. They're going to be completely different. All right. So that's exactly right. So you have to understand that they're going to change, and those loans by themselves can completely change the outcome of the financials. So it's not fair for you to put in the debt service and actually think that that is a projection of the property's performance. When we're doing NOIs and we're doing these evaluations, we're looking at the property as a standalone entity. How does it perform? That's the main thing. All right. So great job there. Not yet, but we'll see. Yeah, you're gonna get it for sure. If you're under a corporation, it possibly can be written off. The mortgage will be written, well, a portion of it. So your mortgage interest is definitely a tax write-off all the time. And then as an investment property, you can depreciate it as well. And since apartments are considered residential commercial, because residential means a place where somebody lays their head, whereas official commercial would be like office, retail, things like that. But because it's residential, it can be depreciated over 27.5 years. So you get your depreciation write-off plus your actual mortgage interest write-off 100% for sure. All right, so for the net operating income, so now we talked about expenses. Boom, what's left is your net operating income. This is what the building makes at the end of the year. Remember, it's what the building makes. Building, right? And so, Ben, we're about to talk about cap rate now, like you asked before. So the NOI is commonly referred to as the NOI. Now, it's not quite your profit margin. It's not quite your profit margin. And it's important to understand that the building itself has a net operating income of this amount, whatever it is. But we have not calculated for the debt coverage that we just talked about. We haven't calculated that. So there's still another expense that we have to consider for profit. Okay. We haven't technically calculated what the depreciation is and the effect on our personal tax rate as well to determine how this investment really performs for us. Now that's another conversation. I'm going to save that for later. If you guys want to have another class on that, let me know. We can really break down the financials really in depth. But we're not worried about that. We just want to get to the NOI, the net operating income. So just understand that, all right? Now, how do we determine value? This goes back to that question that Ben asked, what is capitalization rate? The value is NOI divided by the cap rate. Now, the cap rate, this is one that's important, guys. I'm going to read the Webster Dictionary definition for you, all right? The Webster Dictionary definition says a percentage that relates to the value of an income producing property to its future income. I want you guys to hear that. And it says, how long have I been in business? I've been investing since I bought my first property in 2014. I really started picking it up around end of 2016. And then 2017 is when I really just kind of hit the ground running and was all in on real estate. I was still active duty at the time, but I got out January of 2020. That was last year and a half of my active duty time. It was really just me transitioning, and I was full-time real estate at that point in time. So I've been in since about 2017, which is can't do math that well, but I think it's five years. I can crush math on a calculator, but I think it's about 5 years or so. So the cap rate though, let's talk about that. It's a percentage that relates to the value compared to the future income. I did not say that a cap rate is a rate of return. All right. And I want everybody to understand that. If anybody tells you that a cap rate is a rate of return, they are full of shit, or they just don't really understand what cap rate is. And let me explain why. All right. A cap rate uses the NOI. And remember, we just talked about what is excluded from the NOI when we talk about expenses. It's the debt. If we do not have debt involved in our expenses to calculate an NOI, how can we calculate a rate of return? Does that make sense to everybody? And if it doesn't make sense, please let me know and I'll explain it. But a rate of let's talk about rate of return. Rate of return is say how much money do I put in personally versus how much money I get out every year. So if I put in $100,000 and I get back $20,000 in my pocket at the end of the year, then I made a 20% return on my money, right? But in order to determine how much money I actually get put back in my pocket, we have to consider debt and everything else. So when somebody tells you that a cap rate is a rate of return, that's incorrect. You have to understand what cap rate is. It's just a ratio. This is the way it was explained to me that may help you understand cap rate better. If there was no debt on the property whatsoever, meaning somebody paid complete cash, then a cap rate is essentially would be their cash return. Then it would be a rate of return on their investment, if you think about it that way. Okay. Now, why is this important to understand? Because a cap rate, there is a such thing as a market cap rate. And for the market cap rate, what that means is we're looking at all of the sales in the area, and we're going to look at their income versus what they sold for. And now this is going to be the cap rate. That is the cap rate average across the market. All right. But if I want to just put my money somewhere, so I'm hedging against taxes, meaning I'll take a little return, but you, for example, you want a big return, well, then you can see right now we can put in the same type of money into the same property, and my cap rate will be far less than your cap rate, right? So cap rate is subjective. It's not really a definitive factor. And it's just important to understand that because you will lose more deals than not if you think that the cap rate is the end all be all. All right. So Ben asked a great question. Does that determine if a building is worth it to invest in? So the cap rate, the market cap rate is going to determine the total holistic value that the appraiser gives it, right? So if you go out and you try to get a mortgage, if you're trying to get this mortgage and all of a sudden you're like, yo, I know it's worth $100,000 because the cap rate is 6%. That's the way that I analyzed it. Then the appraiser comes back and he says, well, look, man, based on the market data, I'm willing to give it a cap rate of a 7. Remember, the higher the cap rate, the lower the value. The lower the cap rate, the higher the value, right? So if you evaluate it at a 6 and the appraiser says it's a 7, well, damn, it's not worth $100,000 that I have it under contract for anymore. It's now worth something less. So now you got to go and renegotiate, right? So the cap rate does determine the value, but your question of, is it worth it to invest in? One, I always recommend you have to understand what your overall objective is for investing, period. So if you want a 10% return, then you need to make sure that at the end of the day, when you close, you get a minimum of a 10% return. Minimum. You see what I'm saying? Because that's your objective. That means it's worth it to you. But the way that I look at as far as adding value, which is the next piece here, is what's the cap rate today, the market cap rate today, and how can I get the cap rate lower in the future, right? And remember, cap rate is subjective, but what are some things I can do to influence cap rate? All right. And so that's what we're going to talk about next is how to add value. All right, guys. So to add value, two major parts. One, remember, if value is determined by what? NOI divided by cap rate. So it's only two things that you can do to increase value. Increase the NOI or decrease the cap rate. That's it. If anybody tells you anything different, I guarantee you whatever they told you falls into one of those two categories. Increase the NOI or decrease the cap rate, period. So let's talk about increase the NOI, the net operating income. How can we do that? One of two ways. Increase the income or decrease the expenses. and vacancy is a portion there, but we're always going to use a minimum of 5% always. So if your vacancy is like 12%, then yeah, you can decrease the vacancy too. All right. But increase income. We talked about all those different income strategies and income streams, right? Laundromat, blah, 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 blah. So get creative there. Get really creative in your thought process of how do we add more income potential to this property. Now, decreasing expenses. We talked about this, right? When we open up that profit and loss statement and all of a sudden we see, salary expenses, office supplies, blah, 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 blah. We have to identify which ones are legitimate. All right, cool. Once we identify what's legitimate, we can take a lot of that stuff off the books. Also, if you think about it and you say, hey, look, I'm going to buy this property today, but I know in 5 years, I either want to sell or refinance. Well, by about year 3, you want to start taking that stuff off of your financial statement. So you can show 2 years of the clean financials where it's like, no, I didn't take mileage expense. I didn't take these things, right? And so now, I have a very clean book to hand over. Now, this is a lot different. If you're playing in the 75 plus space, guys, it's really there's a few more intricacies that we're not really talking about right now. But let's just say it's 50 and below in that range. Yeah, take it off because these still can be owned by individuals, mom and pop, not necessarily corporations or large syndications. Okay, so keep that stuff in mind. All right, so that's increase the NOI. Pretty straightforward. The next one is decrease the cap rate, right? Because remember, lower cap rate means higher value. So we want to get that cap rate lower. Now, I just mentioned there is a market cap out there. But remember, we always had to put on the eyes of the appraiser. So if the appraiser is saying, hey, the market cap rate is this, it's because they're evaluating similar properties, similar condition, similar size, and similar so forth to determine what did it previously sell for to determine cap rate. All right. So you guys may have heard of different things like, there's an A class cap rate, there's a B class cap rate, C class cap rate, and there is some truth to that. There's some validity to that. So the question is, how do we decrease cap rate? It's by increasing our class, right? Bear with me. Let's say D class. If you hear a D class cap rate or a D class property, think war zone. Think, slums. You know what I mean? Gunshots through the windows, burglary. Think slums, right? That's D class, right? And they're nothing against it, but that's D class. C class, let's say, to step up, low income area, maybe. People maybe a higher vacancy, right? Maybe a higher vacancy, right? Because people can't always make their payments, right? Then B class as middle class. People are paying, they got jobs, so forth and so on. And then think A class as those premier, the middle of Miami, middle of Charlotte, beautiful apartment type stuff. Think of that as A class. Now that's a super generalistic approach. There actually is some inputs to the classes, but I'm just trying to make sure you guys are following along. So let's say we wanted to increase or decrease the cap rate. What we have to do is say, all right, well, what can bring this C class to a B class? All right, cool. So things we're going to look at is capital expenditures, big things like roofs, HVACs. How old are the HVACs? Are they still window units? Are they window units right now? Can we make them actual central heating and cooling? That would help. Okay. So those are like capital expenditures. Can we repave the parking lot? Is it all cracked up? Little things like that. Amenities are the next one, right? Amenities would be like the laundromats that we talked about, or just in-house laundry facilities. Do they even have washer and dryer hookups? Can we put those in? Parks, dog parks. A good buddy of mine, he does a lot of apartment syndication. He just closed on 600 some odd units. One of the things he loves to do is walk around the grounds, and he'll find just an area that's, not that large, and he'll just fence it off. That's it. Fence it off and put one of those doggy doo-doo bag stands up, and boom, it's a dog park. That's it. That's a dog park. It's an amenity. You know what I mean? He also likes to go around and just input some of those jungle gyms with like mulch down. You know how we grew up playing on the playgrounds and stuff? He'll just throw that into the apartment complex too. Amenity, right? So little amenities like that can bring the class of the property up. Well, if you bring the class of the property up, you decrease the cap rate. All right. And then also increase the quality of tenants, because the more the tenants are paying, the vacancy rate is lower. Quality, they're not missing payments, getting collections, getting evicted, those type of things will stabilize the property, also making it a more valuable property, allowing you to decrease the cap rate. All right. So that's to increase the NOI or decrease the cap rate. And the real key there is to just really be creative in how you're evaluating how to add value to these properties. All right. So now we're at the end, y'all. So what kind of questions do you guys have? I'm going to just do a quick recap while you guys are typing in different questions. But this is it. Whatever questions you have, we got about 10, 15 more minutes left. And I'm going to let you guys go. But any questions you have about anything that we covered, anything about apartment building, we'll definitely talk about some financing pieces because I know that was up here. But any questions that you guys might have. All right. And then just to recap real quick while you guys are typing those out. So remember, when we talk about commercial, specifically in apartment space, we're thinking 5 units and above. All right, 5 units and above. That's going to open up our mindset to say this could be evaluated with the income approach. Remember, it could be comparable sales too, but now we need to start thinking a little bit more creative. Comparable sales is an acceptable valuation, right, for those with super high vacancy and things like that, but income approach is desired, right? You have to be diligent with those financial statements. Make sure you get them all. Make sure you're reviewing them. Make sure that the expenses actually make sense, right? Make sure it's not just fluff charges for tax write-offs. Make sure they make sense to you and the way that you operate, all right? Same, projected added value. Make sure you adjust expenses to your systems. If your property management is 4% and they got theirs at 7%, well, hell, you just found a 3% increase right there. All right, and understand what a cap rate is, capitalization rate is, and understand how it works. Understand how it works, guys, because this will be the determining factor of when you start to win more deals than the next person because you can be more creative with your valuation. All right. Okay. All right. So let's hit some of these questions. Where can we find a great lender for commercial multifam? You can find one right here. Thank you for that soft plug, Ali. Yeah, you can absolutely. So, guys, I can lend commercially and LLCs across all 50 states. That's not an issue. The one inhibiting factor that I have is if the area is extremely rural, meaning a population of less than 30,000 and being more than a mile away of a center city that has a population of 30,000. So that is one of my stipulations. But I do also want to make it very clear, I can provide you 30-year fixed financing on an apartment complex, and I can probably get it to you for somewhere in the 5%, right? Which is pretty attractive for commercial space. But if you guys really start to operate in the commercial space and you get your portfolio nice and big and you get a track record, you can go straight to the Fannie and Freddie financing, and they'll sometimes offer you 30-year fixed at 3% interest on some of these apartment complexes, guys. And that's the sexy financing, right? I do have access to that as well, but in order for me to even show that to you, you have to have the track record and you have to be approved through them, okay? All right, next question. What about owning out-of-state property? So out-of-state property, it's going to be the same thing. So I actually own a lot of my properties are out of state. A lot of mine. The hotel is actually in Georgia. I got a ton of student rentals and others in Illinois, so forth and so on, right? When you own out of state, you have to make sure that you have a team in place that can handle it, though. So I have a property manager there. I have a handyman or a contractor there, the whole shebang. And honestly, I have to pay more attention to those than I have to do the ones in my own backyard. The ones in my backyard, if I wanted to, I could just travel by it and be like, hey, what's going on with this? Or I know more people that if they drive by, they know I own it. And they're like, hey, Mike, what's up with this? Right. And so I can kind of keep tabs on those a little bit better. The ones that are out of state, I do have to pay a little bit more attention to because they will fall at the wayside. But it's nothing different than owning your own. What you'll realize is this: if you're not self-managing, if you aren't self-managing your own property, even right down the street from you, if you're not self-managing that, then the process would be the exact same as an out-of-state. You're going to have a property manager who's going to be reporting to you. Everything's going to be done online. You'll have a phone call or maybe a Zoom call with them every now and then. It's the same thing as out-of-state. All right, so great question. So Ben asked, are hotels the same deal? Basically same valuation method as apartments. And guess what? It absolutely is. It's the same exact thing. Here's the differences, though. The type of potential income changes now. because it's a hotel. So now everything that we talked about for income, vending machines, ATM, they're even more popular now. But we can do things like dry cleaning services. We can do things like in a restaurant in the hotel, if it's big enough, right? Room service. All these different types of potential incomes now increase, all right? The next thing that increases, unfortunately, is vacancy rate. Vacancy rate ain't 5%. It's closer to 30% or more when it comes to hotels, because you got to think about it. Anytime somebody's not in a room, that's a vacancy. And people may come to a hotel for 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, and then there may be a couple of days in between. So the goal is to really try to decrease that vacancy rate as much as we can to maximize how much income that we bring in. The other thing to consider with hotels is it's not like we sign a 12-year lease with a tenant, right? Or with an apartment complex, 12-month lease, not 12 years. With an apartment complex, we can do something like 12-month lease, lock them all in, and we have a projected income now for the next 9 months, 10 months, 12 months. With hotels, everything is seasonal, right? We, depending on where the hotel is, blah, 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 what features and amenities it has, the occupancy can be higher in some seasons and lower in others, right? So for example, let's say it's a beachfront property. During the summer, boom, killing it, right? Very seasonal. We're going to have a lot of income here, very low vacancy. But during the winter, we may have high vacancy and low income, right? So it's seasonal. So we do have to take those averages, and we typically look at them seasonally per quarter of the year to ultimately determine the NOI. And then the last thing about the hotels is the loan products aren't as attractive as apartment complexes. So with apartment complexes, we can get 30-year fixed damn near all day right now. Whereas hotels, a lot of them aren't 30-year fixed. A lot of them are 20, 25 on the high end. And a lot of them won't exceed 65 to 70% loan to value. So we have to bring a lot more money to the table as a down payment for hotels. So it's a little bit different there, but essentially the same, NOI and cap rate. All right, what other questions you guys got? What other questions you guys got? If this was good, guys, go ahead and tap the likes right here on the TikTok. Tap the likes. If on Facebook and stuff, tap the likes and the thumbs up. If you guys got some type of value out of this, I'll be here for another 5 minutes or so. If you guys got any questions whatsoever. All right, here goes a great question. So talking about scaling from single family into apartments as a personal investor, the question says, do you recommend starting with single family and then jumping right into something like apartments? Now, I love this question because it really, again, it goes back to what it is that you want to do. If you want to own apartments one day, I would just ask you to ask yourself, why? Is it because you're looking for a certain number of dollars a month that you want to put in your pocket? Or do you just simply want to own apartment complexes? And there's no right or wrong answer, for sure. There's no right or wrong answer. But if it's for a certain cash amount, just ask yourself, can you do that with single family, or do you need apartments? All right, first and foremost. But besides that, when you're talking about scaling, I love starting out with single family because we can do the thing called house hack, right? We go in, we use our homeowner occupied loan, 5% down, FHA 3.5%, or a VA USDA at 0% down, and we get this beautiful home. If you do it right, you get 4 units right off the bat. Like my little brother, I'm getting him started. He's buying his first property. It's 4 units, but he's still able to use his VA loan. So he's going to live in 1 unit, rent out the others. You live in it for a little bit, then you move out and you do that again. And now you've turned this one onto a pure rental. So imagine if you did that just 2 times, 2 years in a row, FHA, conventional, whatever, 5% down on each of them, 2 quads. You now have 8 units and you put only 5% down on each of them. That's it. And you have 2 quads. At that point in time, depending on that's like an apartment complex. That's an 8-unit apartment complex, right? So you can scale slowly to build your apartment-esque portfolio just by doing that. House hacking, small loan, boom, roll over into it, right? Now, once you do something like that, you can package them all up, free up your personal loans again so you can go get your dream house later. There's no problem with that. But now you have apartment experience. You see what I'm saying? Because you have all of these quads and everything that you're able to put together, package them up, portfolio loan now, and you've rented them out for 2 years. Now you can go out and tell the world, yo, I got apartment experience. And now you can get much more attractive rates when you're going to go play in the apartment space, right? Now, that's just, that's one method, because I got a lot of buddies who only started in apartments. One of them, matter of fact, really good friend of mine, the first one I helped, we bought a duplex first. That was it, but it was pure investment. I helped him buy his first 13 unit and then a 16 unit back to back. And now he owns over 680 units. He does syndication, but still all he does is apartments, and he was able to scale too. So again, I would just go back to that original question, ask yourself why you care, or why you care to own apartments. What is it the apartments actually do for you? All right, Edward says, I thought the 5% only counts towards your first purchase only. Oh, no, it doesn't, Edward. 5%, the 5% down, everybody qualifies for every single homeowner occupied loan that you intend to buy ever. 5% down, guys. I want everybody to understand that. Most people don't understand that. Now, the FHA, the 3.5% down, once you use that once, it's difficult to use again. All right. It's difficult to use again. There are some extenuating circumstances, but it's difficult to use again. The VA loan, the 0% down for veterans, you can use that as many times as you want, but until you reach your limit of eligibility. All right. That has its limitations. USDA, only certain areas, and you can only use once. USDA loan, right? So certain loans have certain limitations, but your 5% down loan, that is just a homeowner occupied loan. That's it. Yes, you will have PMI, private mortgage insurance. Yes, you can only use it once a year. You do not have to live in the property for the whole year, but you can only use it again once a year. And yes, you have to be able to support your entire loan with your debt to income. Your income has to be able to support that. But besides that, man, you can use it many times as you want, as many times as you want, that you can afford it. Yes. All right. So the next question says, I thought FHA only works on residential, not commercial. You're exactly right. FHA, and sorry if I made it sound confusing, but you're right. FHA is only used for residential, but understand 4 units and below is considered residential. So if you have a duplex, a triplex, or a quadplex, that qualifies with FHA. So you can still go in there and get multiple units with an FHA loan. And that's why it's so powerful, man. If people really understood that, like I said, in 2 years, in a perfect world, obviously, income and everything like that matters too. But in 2 years, if you got a quad, first one was a 3.5% down FHA. The next year was a 5% down conventional. You got 8 units right there, and you only put 8.5% down. Right. And they're all producing rental income. You see what I'm saying? So it's a very powerful way to scale. Yeah. So Ben asked, do I have YouTube breaking down house hacking? Yes, absolutely. So I have a YouTube channel with my partner. It's called Military Cash Flow. We got a YouTube, Facebook page, all that good stuff. We got house hacking in there. We have syndication in there. We got some more apartment stuff. You can go out and check it out. All free information there. Yeah, the house hacking is extremely powerful. I recommend if you guys are just now hearing house hacking, but you're interested in investing, to highly consider it. I know one of the sticking points is, hey, I got a wife and I got kids, or I have a spouse and I have kids, and my spouse doesn't want to necessarily move around. They want to be settled. Yeah, that could be a sticking point. But if you can convince the family, if you're single, it's no problem. If you're single, you just got to suck it up. But if you got a family, if you can convince the family, like, hey, look, we're going to be moving around just a little bit, but you give me 2 or 3 years and we're going to have this rental portfolio, they might be okay with it. Then at the end of the rental portfolio, here's the other kicker, guy. At the end of the rental portfolio, remember, your debt to income gets affected every time you get a new mortgage. Yes, your rents from those units can help, but it gets harder and harder to just use your job to buy this property if you have a job. So what happens when you got this beautiful portfolio and now you're ready to buy your forever home, right? The one for you and your family and your kids. And you're like, man, I can't afford it. What do I do? What you do is you take all of those properties that you have before, and now you refinance them into an LLC loan, a commercial loan. So now they come completely off of your personal credit, and it just restarts your ability to buy a whole new house from the ground up. That's how you do it, guys. That's the secret That is the secret. That's how I was able to. That's when I started. I did VA loan, VA flip, VA loan, VA house hack, subject to refinanced them and started over. And I just refinanced last year. The market is still crazy as hell, but my intent is to do the same thing again this year. Single family home, single family home, single family home, and do it for another couple of years. Another question here says, does 3 million 5.38% cap rate for 68 units sound like the average rent is $724 in my area? All right, so let's run through this. This is great. This is a great question, Ben. One thing I did not include in this is a practical exercise. So let's go through this as a practical exercise. All right, I'm going to have to type this out. Bear with me. I'm looking for computers and stuff. Computers and calculators here. All right, so we're going to run through this practical exercise. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, and mind you, I don't have all the numbers in front of me. I don't have the expenses, but we're going to use some of the general rules of thumb that are used in the industry when we think about expenses, and I'll explain every single one of them. All right. So first and foremost, we're going to go ahead and check to see what that NOI is going to look like. We're going to check to see what that NOI is going to look like based on the numbers that you give me. So $724 a month. I'm sorry, $724 a unit. So 724 times 68 units. This is going to give us our potential gross income. All right. I got to pull up the calculator still. Y'all bear with me. All right. 724 times 68. So potential gross income for the year is $62,264. Everybody with me so far? Okay. Now we're going to use industry norms here, because I don't have the financials in front of me. So remember what I said, the absolute minimum vacancy rate needs to be 5%. Vacancy rate needs to be 5%. So we're going to do 5% of that. And so I just do multiply by 95%. That gives us our effective gross income of $59,150.80. For this, we can round up or round down. When I'm running analysis, I'm going to always round to the nearest dollar, or the nearest 10 is fine too. There's $10, but I tend to round down because it's more conservative. Just my approach. Just keep that in mind. So I'll go 59,150. Now for expenses, because we don't have the financial statements in front of us, one of the rules of thumb that you might hear often is called the 50% rule. The 50% rule simply states that, hey, look, all things being equal, and this typically includes debt service, though. This typically includes debt service. My expense ratio is going to be 50%. So I'm just going to knock out 50% right away. Now, the 50% rule typically includes debt service, whereas NOI does not. So this number is skewed. And the 50% should not be your total analysis number. This is something just to skim and to make sure you're in the right ballpark, all right? So let's go ahead and calculate NOI at 50% of that effective gross income. So that's going to give us NOI of $29,575. And I'm going to leave it there. It's 40 cents, but we're going to leave it there, all right? Does everybody follow me so far on that? Okay. So now our NOI is $29,575. Now we're going to divide it by that cap rate there. So we're going to divide it by 5.3. We got here 5.38. Hopefully you guys are following along. Maybe got a calculator or something and you're doing your thing. Oh, bear with me. So I made a mistake. I put divided by 5.38, but it's 5%. Remember, cap rates are percentages, so it's really 0.0538. So give me 1 second. 29575. 0.0538. All right. So you see right there, that's pretty bad. That's pretty low. So I can tell you right now that my 50% is grossly overdone. So we're going to need to see financial statements for that. But let's do the reverse math. Let's see what they think the NOI is based on their evaluation. So here you would do value divided by cap rate. I can't use this calculator. Give me a second. Calculator on the computer always hurts me, man, because it's just so slow. Okay. $3 million. So they're saying that their NOI is $161,400. Yeah, 161,000. 161,400. So what that to me sounds like is you're saying that 724 is the average income for the area. Although that may be the average rental unit per the area, this property very specifically must be much higher, much higher. Okay. And it depends on how good the quality of the property is. Remember, the one downside about averages is that, you know, if one of the units is $300 a month and the other one is $1,000 a month, we include those 300s, which really bring down the scope of the value there for the average. So what I would recommend, Ben, is grab the financials. If you can grab the financials, we could also do another review like that and kind of run through there. So right now, when you get the financials, though, you need to make sure that the NOI actually reflects 161,400. Let me make sure I wrote that number down right. 3 million. Because I already deleted. Yeah, 161,400. All right. So that's what you need to make sure that the NOI reflects. So when you get that, because they're going to give you the financial statements and all that stuff. And you know what? Because brokers are smart, they may see it, make a couple of adjustments and be like, yeah, it counts. It's 161,400. Therefore, I can give it a 5.38 cap rate. And here's the value. Because they know how people tend to look at it. But you have to be a little bit more keen and make sure that the numbers make sense. Make sure that they're adding back the right things and they're taking away the right things too. All right. Hopefully that helped. Sorry, I couldn't be a little bit more useful to you, but there's a lot of missing information there for that one. All right. All right. What else? What else you got? Oh, and just so you know, when I did the math that way, based off of 724 with the 50% expense ratio at a 5.38 cap rate, it gave me a valuation around $500,000. That's how low it was. That's how off it was, right? So you have to get those financials so you can see the rent roll and everything else to make sure that those numbers look right. All right. Well, hey guys, hey, I greatly appreciate it. Hopefully you guys found some enjoyment out of this. Again, hit the likes, hit the whatever if you found some good value. And if you guys want more content on this, please let me know. If you guys have friends who are interested in actually learning real estate investing, the nitty gritty of it all, please let them know. Reach out to me, follow me, share my content, all that good stuff, and we'll keep going from there. We'll be doing this once a month. I'll be bringing back you guys on the TikTok side of the house. I'll invite you guys every single month for this. And then as you guys on Facebook, YouTube, all this other good stuff, you guys see me every month. So just realize we'll be coming back next month, same time. All right. Until then, I really appreciate you guys coming in. Let me know if there's anything else I can do for you. And I'll see you guys next time. Turn off all this stuff here.